In a city that never sleeps, Lisa thought she had found the kind of love that could last a lifetime. But Park's devotion hides a dangerous obsession. What begins as an exhilarating romance soon spirals into jealousy, control, and suffocating tension. Every secret glance, every unexpected visit, every late-night message pushes their love to the edge until desire and obsession collide in a shocking climax. Will Lisa escape before their passion destroys them both? Or is some love too intense to survive? The city was alive in the way only a large American city could be. Traffic hummed endlessly through crowded streets. Neon lights flickered above late-night diners, and the sidewalks carried the constant rhythm of people chasing dreams that always seemed just a little out of reach. For Lisa, that restless energy had become both a comfort and a distraction. She had learned to bury herself in work. Most mornings began the same way. Coffee in one hand, laptop in the other, her mind already moving through deadlines and meetings before the day had properly begun. It was easier that way. Staying busy left little room for memories, especially the painful ones. Her last relationship had ended badly enough to leave scars she preferred not to examine too closely. Love is overrated anyway, she often joked to her coworkers, though the laugh that followed usually sounded thinner than she intended. So when her friend Jasmine insisted she attend a birthday gathering one Friday night, Lisa nearly refused. "Girl, I'm tired," she protested over the phone. "You've been tired for 6 months," Jasmine replied bluntly. "Put on something nice and come out. You don't have to meet anybody. Just breathe for one night." Reluctantly, Lisa agreed. The restaurant Jasmine had chosen was lively and warm, filled with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled food drifting through the air. Lisa arrived later than most guests, slipping quietly into the celebration with the polite smile she had perfected over the past year. She was reaching for a glass of wine when a voice beside her spoke. "You look like someone who is deciding whether to escape through the door." Lisa turned, slightly startled. The man standing next to her was tall, neatly dressed, and carried himself with a calm confidence that immediately caught her attention. His dark eyes held an amused softness. "And what makes you think I'm trying to escape?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He smiled faintly. "Because you've been standing near the exit for 3 minutes." She laughed before she could stop herself. "Well, maybe I like having options." "I understand that," he said gently. "Cities like this can feel overwhelming sometimes." There is something about the way he said it, quiet, thoughtful, that made her curious. "I'm Park," he added, extending his hand. "Lisa." Their handshake lingered just a moment longer than necessary. What surprised Lisa most was how easily the conversation unfolded after that. They moved to a quieter corner of the room and began talking as if they had known each other for years. Park spoke about moving to the United States several years earlier to expand his family's business, about the strange mixture of excitement and loneliness that came with starting over in a new country. Lisa found herself opening up in return. She spoke about her childhood, about the career she had fought hard to build, and eventually, without meaning to, about the breakup that had made her wary of trusting anyone again. Park listened closely, never interrupting, his attention unwavering. "That must have hurt," he said quietly. Lisa shrugged, though her voice softened. "It did. But life moves on." For a moment, Park simply studied her face, as if memorizing something important. "You seem stronger than most people I know," he said. The sincerity in his tone made her unexpectedly self-conscious. By the time the party ended, the rest of the guests had begun drifting home, but neither of them seemed eager to leave. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around them as they stood beneath the glow of streetlights. "I'm glad I came tonight," Lisa admitted. Park's smile was warm but measured. "So am I." The following days passed, yet Park remained unexpectedly present in her life. One afternoon, as Lisa stepped out of her office building, she nearly stopped in surprise when she saw him leaning casually against a nearby coffee stand. He held out a cup toward her. "You mentioned you liked caramel lattes." She blinked. "You remembered that?" "I try to remember things that matter." Moments like that began appearing more often. A message wishing her luck before an important meeting. A late-night phone call that stretched into long conversations about everything and nothing. Lunch deliveries that arrived at her office with simple notes written in careful handwriting. Her coworkers noticed the change almost immediately. "You're smiling at your phone again," Jamine teased one afternoon. Lisa rolled her eyes but couldn't deny it. Something about Park's presence had slipped quietly past the emotional walls she had built so carefully. Yet even in those early days, there were moments she couldn't quite explain. Sometimes Park's gaze lingered on her with an intensity that felt almost too deep. Occasionally, he would ask questions about her past relationships with a curiosity that seemed unusually persistent. Still, whenever Lisa noticed those small details, she dismissed them. Maybe it was simply passion. Maybe it was the excitement of something new. After all, love had a way of arriving unexpectedly when a person least expected it. Standing by her apartment window one evening, phone pressed her ear as Park's voice drifted warmly through the line. Lisa found herself smiling into the night. For the first time in a long while, hope felt possible again. What she didn't yet understand was that the connection growing between them was far stronger than ordinary attraction. And sometimes, when emotions ignite too quickly, what feels like destiny can slowly become something far more dangerous. The weeks that followed their first meeting seemed to move with a strange and beautiful speed, as if time itself had decided to favor their growing connection. What began as simple dinners and late-night conversations quickly evolved into something far more consuming. Lisa and Park found themselves drawn to each other in ways that surprised them both. Soon, it felt almost impossible to spend a day apart. If Lisa had a long morning at work, Park would appear outside her office building during lunch, leaning casually against his car with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. If Park had a busy evening meeting, Lisa would wait for his call afterward, sometimes staying awake far later than she intended just to hear his voice. Their time together was filled with laughter that came easily and often. Friends who saw them together couldn't miss the warmth between them. When they entered restaurants or walked down crowded streets side by side, there was an undeniable closeness in the way their hands found each other without thinking. "You two are ridiculous," Jamine teased one evening as the 3 of them sat together at a rooftop bar. "I swear the air gets sweeter when you walk into a room." Lisa laughed, leaning slightly into Park's shoulder. "Don't be jealous." Park simply smiled, his arm resting comfortably around her. But it wasn't just affection that made their relationship feel intense. Park approached love with a level of devotion that sometimes left Lisa breathless. One Friday afternoon, a delivery arrived at her office, a bouquet of deep red roses so large it barely fit on her desk. Her coworkers gathered around in amazement. "Who is this guy?" one of them asked. Lisa glanced at the small card attached to the flowers. "Just because you deserve beautiful things." Park. Later that evening when she called him, laughing softly, she said, "You're going to get me in trouble at work. My boss thinks I'm secretly dating a billionaire." Park chuckled on the other end of the line. "Would that be a problem? It might make people suspicious. I don't mind people knowing I care about you." And he showed it often. Weekend trips appeared unexpectedly on her schedule. Short flights to coastal towns, quiet cabins surrounded by forests. Evenings filled with candlelit dinners and long conversations that stretched deep into the night. For Lisa, who had spent so long protecting her heart, the experience felt almost magical. Sometimes she would watch him across a restaurant table, his calm, dark eyes focused entirely on her, and wonder how she had been lucky enough to meet someone who seemed so attentive. Yet beneath that devotion, subtle changes began to emerge. One night, while they were walking through a crowded downtown street, Park casually asked, "That guy you mentioned at work, Michael, was it?" Lisa glanced at him. "Yeah, Michael. Why? You talk about him sometimes. He's on my project team." Park nodded thoughtfully, but his tone carried quiet curiosity. "You two spend a lot of time together?" Lisa laughed lightly. "It's called working, Park." He smiled, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. At first, questions like that felt harmless, almost playful. He would tease her gently about male coworkers or ask about old college friends with a curious grin. But gradually the tone shifted. The questions began appearing more frequently. Sometimes he would ask the same thing in slightly different ways, as if searching for details she might have missed. One evening while they sat together in her living room, Park glanced at her phone lighting up on the table. "Who's texting you this late?" he asked. Lisa picked it up and glanced at the screen. "Just Jasmine." Park nodded, though his gaze lingered on the phone a moment longer before returning to her. Other times, his concern came out as irritation. One afternoon, Lisa called him apologetically. "Hey, I might have to cancel dinner tonight. My boss scheduled an emergency meeting." There was a pause on the line. "A meeting?" Park repeated slowly. "Yeah, we're behind on a deadline, but we planned tonight all week." "I know, and I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you tomorrow." His voice remained calm, but the warmth had faded slightly. "Work always seems to come first." Lisa frowned. "Park, it's my job." "I understand," he said quietly, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. When she finished the meeting that evening and finally checked her phone, she noticed 6 missed calls and several messages waiting. "Are you still in the meeting? Lisa, call me when you see this." The messages weren't angry, just increasingly anxious. Despite these small moments of tension, their relationship continued to burn with the same passionate intensity. In fact, the arguments sometimes seemed to deepen their bond rather than weaken it. Once, after a disagreement about her spending time with coworkers after work, Lisa had nearly stormed out of Park's apartment. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she insisted, frustration rising in her voice. Park ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "I know. I worry." "About what?" "About losing you." His voice softened so suddenly that her anger faded. "I've never felt like this before," he admitted, stepping closer. "You matter to me more than you realize." Moments like that made it impossible for Lisa to stay upset for long. His vulnerability disarmed her, pulling her back into the warmth that had drawn them together in the first place. Still, her friends are beginning to notice things she struggled to see clearly herself. One evening, Jasmine pulled her aside after dinner. "Lisa," she said gently, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Does Park ever feel intense to you?" Lisa blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way he's always checking where you are, who you're with." "It's a little much." Lisa sighed, shaking her head. "You're overthinking it. He just cares." Caring and controlling aren't the same thing. Lisa crossed her arms, her expression defensive now. "You don't understand him like I do." Jasmine studied her carefully, but didn't argue further. As Lisa walked home later that night, she thought about the conversation, though she quickly pushed the concern aside. What she and Park had felt rare, powerful, different from anything she had experienced before. And relationships like that didn't come along often. Still, somewhere beneath the passion and excitement, an invisible boundary was slowly beginning to dissolve. The delicate line between love and obsession. Neither of them realized it yet, but their intense connection was already moving towards something far more complicated than simple romance. Months slipped by, and with them the bright, effortless magic that had once surrounded Lisa and Park's relationship began to shift in ways Lisa could no longer ignore. At first, the changes were so gradual they felt almost invisible, like a quiet cloud drifting across a sunny sky. But slowly, the warmth she once felt so naturally around Park started to carry a weight she struggled to explain. In the beginning, Park's devotion had felt flattering, even comforting. Now it sometimes felt overwhelming. It started with small suggestions. One evening, they were sitting together in Lisa's apartment while she scrolled through her phone, laughing softly at a message from Jasmine. Park glanced at the screen and tilted his head slightly. "You're still spending a lot of time with her," he said. Lisa looked up, surprised. "Of course. She's my best friend." Park gave a polite smile, but there was something careful in his tone. "I just feel like sometimes she doesn't respect our relationship." "What do you mean?" "She encourages you to stay out late, go to those crowded bars, things like that." He shrugged lightly. "I just worry she's not a good influence." Lisa frowned slightly, but brushed the comment aside. "Jasmine has always been like that. It's just her personality." Park didn't argue, but after that night, comments about her friends began appearing more often. "This coworker you keep mentioning. Michael, he said one evening while they walked through the city park. "Why does he text you so much?" "He doesn't," Lisa replied patiently. "We're working on the same project." Park kicked a small stone off the path as they walked. "Still, it feels unnecessary." At first, Lisa tried to reassure him gently, believing his concerns came from simple insecurity. She often placed a calming hand on his arm and said softly, "Park, you don't have to worry so much. I'm with you, remember?" But reassurance never seemed to last long. Gradually, his opinions began to shape her decisions in ways she didn't fully realize at first. When Jasmine invited her out after work, Lisa sometimes declined because she knew Park preferred that she spend evenings with him. When coworkers planned group dinners, she often left early after receiving messages asking when she would be home. One night, while they were cooking dinner together in Park's apartment, Lisa mentioned an upcoming work conference that would require her to travel for 2 days. Park stopped chopping vegetables and looked at her carefully. "You didn't tell me about this before." "I only found out today," she replied. "And you have to go? It's important for the project." His expression darkened slightly. "It feels like your job always comes first." Lisa sighed, placing the spoon she was holding down on the counter. "Park, my career matters. You know that." "I'm not saying it doesn't," he said quickly, though his voice carried tension. "I just think relationships require sacrifices." The conversation ended quietly, but Lisa couldn't shake the uneasiness it left behind. As time passed, disagreements like that became more frequent. The easy laughter that once filled their time together now appeared between long stretches of tension. One afternoon, Lisa stepped outside her office building during lunch and found Park waiting beside his car. Normally, his surprise visits made her smile, but that day his expression was unusually serious. "Who were you having lunch with?" he asked immediately. Lisa blinked in confusion. "My team." "What?" "I saw you through the window," he said. "You were sitting next to that same guy again." "You mean Michael?" she asked incredulously. "Park, he works with me." "You seemed very comfortable with him." The accusation in his tone caught her completely off guard. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. Park's jaw tightened. "I'm just asking questions." "Questions?" Lisa shook her head in disbelief. "You're acting like I did something wrong." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Later that evening, after Lisa had returned home, still feeling frustrated, her phone rang. Park's name appeared on the screen. When she answered, his voice sounded completely different, soft, strained, almost fragile. "Lisa, I'm sorry about earlier." She remained quiet. "I know I overreacted," he continued. "Sometimes I just get scared." "Scared of what?" "Of losing you." His voice cracked slightly, and the sincerity in it tugged at her heart. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said quietly. "Sometimes I worry I'm not enough." Lisa leaned back against her couch, the anger slowly dissolving into sympathy. "Park, you don't have to feel that way. I promise I'll do better," he whispered. "Just please don't give up on us." Moments like that made it incredibly difficult for Lisa to stay upset. His vulnerability felt genuine, and every time he apologized, she convinced herself that things would improve. Relationships weren't perfect, she reminded herself. They required patience. Yet, deep down, something continued to bother her. Late one evening, after another small argument that ended in one of Park's emotional apologies, Lisa stood alone by her bedroom window, watching the quiet city lights below. A question drifted slowly through her mind, one she had tried to ignore before. Was this really what love was supposed to feel like? The thought unsettled her. Still, whenever doubt crept in, Park found a way to pull her back with gentle words, affectionate gestures, and promises that things would change. What Lisa couldn't yet see clearly was the darker truth slowly unfolding beneath those apologies. Park's feelings for her had already crossed a dangerous line. What had once been passionate love was quietly transforming into something far deeper, far more consuming, something that no longer resembled love at all. It was obsession, and once obsession takes hold of the human heart, it rarely releases its grip without leaving damage behind. Lisa had been anticipating this night for weeks. A colleague's birthday party, just a casual gathering at a trendy downtown lounge, promised a rare reprieve from the tension that had begun to dominate her life. For once, She could let her hair down, laugh freely, and reconnect with friends she had gradually drifted away from during the past months. She told herself it was harmless, a small act of independence, and perhaps a way to remind herself that her life didn't revolve entirely around Park. The evening began perfectly. She was enveloped in the warmth of familiar faces, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of music that seemed to vibrate through her chest. She laughed at jokes she had forgotten she liked, danced without care, and let herself be pulled into the easy flow of conversation with people who had known her before Park became such a central figure in her life. For a moment, she felt alive again, the exhilaration of freedom washing over her like a cool breeze on a humid night. But just as quickly as it had begun, that freedom was shattered. Park appeared, and the room seemed to shift around him. He wasn't announced, wasn't expected, yet there he stood, his tall frame cutting a sharp line through the party's casual energy. His smile was tight, polite, but the tension in his posture was palpable. His dark eyes scanned the room, searching, and the instant they landed on Lisa talking and laughing with a male co-worker, something in his body stiffened, a shadow passing over his face. "Lisa," he said quietly, though there was a hardness under the calm tone. "We need to talk." She froze, the laughter on her lips dying. "Park, what are you?" "Outside," he interrupted, his voice steady but charged with an energy that made her stomach knot. Moments later, they were on the sidewalk, the noise of the lounge now a dull murmur behind them. Park's eyes bore into hers, and she could see the storm building just beneath his surface. "You can't just go to these places without telling me," he said sharply. "Talking to other men, laughing like that. Do you even care about us?" Lisa's chest tightened. "Park, I do care, but this isn't fair. I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to enjoy an evening without being interrogated. You think I'm interrogating you?" His jaw clenched. I can't stand the thought of losing you. Do you even realize how that feels?" "I do," she shouted, tears stinging her eyes. "I feel trapped. Love shouldn't feel like this. It shouldn't feel like a cage." Her words struck him like a physical blow, but the fracture had already begun. Park's composure wavered, his devotion mutating into something darker, more desperate. The quiet, attentive man she had fallen for was shifting into someone she barely recognized, someone whose fear of losing her eclipsed reason, whose love had transformed into possessive urgency. Messages flooded her phone late at night, some pleading, some anxious, all relentless. Phone calls arrived at odd hours, each one brimming with tension, each one a subtle reminder that he was watching, always watching. The exhilaration they had once shared, the way she had felt alive in his presence, had become suffocating. Every decision she made, every step she took, seemed to require his silent approval. And though part of her longed to escape, she knew that walking away from someone whose attachment had grown into obsession would be far more complicated than simply leaving. Park was no longer just a man in love. He was a force she couldn't control, and he refused to let go of the woman he believed belonged to him. Every text, every surprise appearance, every probing question reminded Lisa that the man she had once trusted might now be the very thing threatening her freedom, and that the price of breaking away could be far higher than she had ever imagined. The clarity didn't arrive suddenly. It crept up on Lisa in quiet, almost imperceptible waves. After another long, emotionally draining argument with Park, she sat alone in her apartment, the city lights spilling across the hardwood floors, illuminating the fatigue etched into her face. The words from earlier still echoed in her mind. The accusations, the pleading, the tense silences that stretched unbearably between them. She could feel her independence slipping further with each encounter, her sense of peace shrinking into a corner she could barely reach. For months she had tried to convince herself that their love, so intense, so all-consuming, was worth the cost. She had rationalized away his jealousy, dismissed his controlling tendencies as care or worry, and leaned into the moments of vulnerability he offered. But tonight, as she traced her fingers along the cold rim of her coffee mug, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. Their relationship was no longer love. It had become a cage. Every text, every sudden visit, every piercing question had eroded the freedom she once cherished. Her decision crystallized like ice forming in the night. She would end it. The next afternoon, she met him at a quiet cafe, the kind with small tables tucked against windows, where conversations felt private even amidst the hum of other patrons. Park was already there when she arrived, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, an expression that was calm but carried the familiar intensity she had learned to recognize all too well. "Lisa," he said warmly, standing as she approached. "Are you okay?" She nodded, forcing herself to smile, though her heart thumped unevenly. "Park, we need to talk." He frowned slightly, lowering himself back into his chair. "Talk? About what?" Taking a deep breath, she met his gaze steadily. "About us. About me. I can't do this anymore. This relationship, it's not healthy for either of us. I need to step away." For a moment, he laughed nervously, a sound that unsettled her more than anger ever could. "You're joking," he said lightly, though his eyes flickered with something darker. "This is just another one of those fights, right? You'll come back. You always do." "I'm serious," Lisa said firmly, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt inside. "I've tried to make this work, Park, but it's destroying me. I can't keep losing myself in a love that suffocates me." He stared at her, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, his voice came out low and desperate. "I can change, Lisa. I'll do anything. Park, it's too late." She interrupted gently but firmly. "I've given this my all. I can't keep living like this." His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles widening. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he said, voice trembling. "Do you remember how right everything felt? How we couldn't stop talking, couldn't stop laughing?" "I do," she whispered, the memory still warm but fragile. "And I'll always remember it. But people change, circumstances change, and sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people whole." For a heartbeat, the vulnerability returned. Park's shoulders slumped, and she saw the man she had fallen for, the one who had once listened, cared, and made her feel seen. Then, just as suddenly, the vulnerability vanished. His jaw tightened, his posture stiffened, and his dark eyes burned with a fierce, unyielding intensity. "You can't just walk away," he said sharply, the edge in his voice cutting through the cafe like a knife. "I won't let you." Lisa's chest tightened. The love that had once felt exhilarating, that had drawn her so completely into him, now pressed against her inescapably, suffocating. But she had made up her mind. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her gaze unwavering. "I'm leaving, Park. Please don't follow me." And she did. Outside, the city moved on in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the fracture behind her. Lisa felt the weight of the decision lift, yet she knew the story was far from over. Park's obsession was not something that would vanish with distance or a firm word. The man who had once been devotion itself had become something volatile, unpredictable, and dangerous. She had escaped the relationship, for now, but the truth lingered like a shadow. Sometimes, the most perilous moment in an obsessive love story is not when it begins, but when it ends. The weeks after Lisa walked away from Park were quieter, but that quiet was deceptive. At first, she allowed herself to breathe again, to stretch limbs stiffened by months of emotional strain, and to reclaim the parts of her life she had left behind. She reconnected with friends who had longed for her presence, laughing at jokes she had once thought too trivial, letting herself linger in conversations that carried no judgment, no tension, no hidden agenda. She buried herself in work again, filling her calendar with meetings, projects, and deadlines, determined to reconstruct the stability that Park's obsession had slowly eroded. Yet no matter how full her days became, no matter how carefully she tried to rebuild her boundaries, the shadow of him refused to recede. Messages arrived at odd hours, sometimes long, rambling texts filled with vague affection or hints of jealousy, sometimes short notes that made her chest tighten. Occasionally, she would see him unexpectedly, at a cafe she frequented for lunch, near her apartment building, when she was leaving for work, at the park where she went to clear her mind. Each time he claimed coincidence, an almost believable story, but the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Lisa began to feel the unease she had tried to push aside for so long. Every glance from someone across the street, every phone ping, reminded her of his presence in a way she couldn't escape. And slowly, the unsettling truth settled into her bones. Park had not faded. His feelings, instead of diminishing with time, had intensified. The love that had once thrilled her with its immediacy now carried a quiet menace, like embers left too long in a fireplace. In Park's mind, their story was unfinished. He believed the separation was temporary, a minor obstacle in a narrative that he still controlled. Every encounter, every message, every accidental meeting was, in his mind, an opportunity to steer fate back to the way he believed it should be. Time apart was simply a test, one he was certain Lisa would ultimately fail, and in that certainty, his obsession grew stronger. But Lisa had learned a truth he refused to see. Love cannot survive when freedom is stripped away. It cannot thrive under constant surveillance, under constant expectation, under constant fear. She realized that the very intensity that had drawn her into him had also been the force that threatened to destroy her entirely. The final confrontation between them was inevitable. It came on a rainy evening, the city's slick streets reflecting the cold neon lights. When Park cornered her outside a cafe she had chosen for its anonymity. His eyes, once warm and inviting, now held something fierce, almost feral. "Lisa, you don't understand," he said, voice low, trembling. "We're meant to be together. All of this separation, it's wrong." "I understand perfectly," Lisa said, holding his gaze steadily. "I understand that what we had was real, but I also understand that love doesn't exist without choice. You can't make me stay. You can't control me." For a long moment, the rain fell in silence between them, and in that silence, the magnitude of what had happened hit them both. The passion that had once made them feel unstoppable had become something dangerous, something irreversible. Their love had burned too quickly, too fiercely, and the destruction left behind was not merely emotional. It was psychological, a scar on both their hearts. In the end, neither Park nor Lisa could return to the person they had been before. The exhilaration they had once felt, the intoxicating closeness that had seemed so rare, had transformed into caution, fear, and wariness. Love, they realized painfully, is a delicate substance. Taken in excess, in doses too intense, it becomes toxic. And by the time the smoke clears, when both hearts are left raw and trembling, nothing is ever the same again. Even as Lisa walked away that night, rain soaking through her coat, she knew this was not just the end of a relationship. It was the reckoning of a love that had pushed boundaries too far, a lesson written in heartbreak and obsession, leaving scars neither of them would ever forget. If you love this story, do well to hit that subscribe button. Thanks.